Youngblood. Roll call. Jeff. Die Hard. Chapel. Riptide. Photon. Sci-Fi. Bedrock. Purple Girl. Cable. Wolverine. Deadpool. Snarf. First thought. Youngblood.
The Nerd Podcast is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Today's guest theme song, First Thought, Last Thought, by Mike Slater. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another glorious episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. I'm the second guy. That's me, Jeff May. I am your co-host, and along with me, my lovely, beautiful co-host,
Dre, the thing knockoff to your shafts, and we have a special guest who I don't know, rip-off of Jack Kirby. I don't know, Jeff. I don't know. What are we talking about today?
Don't do a bit, Dre. It's Dre Alvarez, folks. Found everywhere as @NerdNumbers, but we have an amazing, very special guest who decided to ruin our month by showing us up with one of the most difficult projects that we've had. The amazing MikeSlater.com. It sounds like I said might, by the way, on that one.
It is Mike. It's sometimes Mike, but I'm not that small anymore, so I've grown into Mike by
Folks,
now.
mighty Mike Slater is here. Mike, introduce yourself to the crowd on top of the fact that you are a producer, drinkwithmikeslater.com. Every time Dre plugs the back catalog, tell us a little bit about yourself. Do anything you've also contributed to the show?
Yeah, I contributed a theme song. It was a random submission I did as an exercise because I heard you guys were just starting the I Must Break You channel, or you were starting it.
Yeah.
I was producing a different podcast, doing all the music for, and I needed some kind of a mental exercise to get myself out of trying to figure out a new theme. So I wrote a theme, what I thought you would like for your show as an exercise. It came out good enough for me to just say, I'm not going to do anything with this. Why don't I send this to you and Dre? And it ended up working out for the show.
We'll take your practice. I mean, that's a great vibe for us. Also, is by the way, give us your first drafts. We'll take. Yeah. I love it, Mike. It's really great, and I know people do too because I have had people say that they really like the theme song.
Sweet. Yeah, it was from Andre 3000 gave me the idea because he was getting out of his own mental block when writing The Love Below, and he wrote a song prototype for Janet Jackson. And then he ended up, after he got that out of his mental, he's like, I'm just going to sing and put it on the album.
Yeah, that's perfect. Now, Dre, I did mention that drinkwithmikeslater.com is a producer of Nerd. And did you know, I don't know if you knew this, that if you go to patreon.com/JeffMay and you sign up to be a producer, you can produce Jeff Has Cool Friends, you can produce Nerd, you can produce both, you can get stuff in the mail. But we're going to talk about those amazing people that have decided they are going to produce Nerd. We normally do producers in the middle of the show, but we have a producer on the show. So why not do this? A big shout out to Dan Hackroyd, the amazing Norm from Cheers, Bimmy and Jimmy out fighting crime. Dre, is that what they're doing?
Ooh, nope,
Bimmy
I'm not
and Jimmy
changing it this time. Yep, they're good.
Avoiding getting sued over international copyright laws. A big shout out to Burrito, my best friend. And of course, hey guys, it's your friendly neighborhood Jeff May here. Now, you know what I think is even sexier than producers' names? Pickles. God damn it, do I love me a big old thick, bumpy, veiny pickle. And if you're not going to eat yours, please, no matter what I say after this, send them to me. That is a bit someone's trying to do. Joke's on them. I agree with everything that was said right there.
It's true. Jeff gets final cut. It's not like this is the cue cards. He's not, Will Ferrell and Anchorman. He could change it, but Jeff is no. And in fact, if I'm like, hey, I can cut that out, Jeff's going to tell me to leave it in.
Oh, are you going to eat your pickle? That's going to go on my family crest.
Oh, fair enough. All right. Now, by the way, Jeff, you already did it once, but I'll do it again just because you're a guest on the show. Drinkwithmikeslater.com. Every time Dre plugs the back catalog, spoiler alert, I'm going to try and do something with this show. We also have Porcelain Jesus, who is the unofficial father of these comics. I'm going there. I'm sorry. I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. Shout out to Ricky Cilantro. Shout out to Jeff Has a 12-inch Tick action figure. El Solo says, organize and fight. No one will give you what you need by asking nicely. Good on people. They actually did that the month we're doing this. Yep. The Enchanted Wandering Unpierced Left Nipple Cider served at room temperature. And finally, Bobby opulent. All right,
Yeah.
Jeff, there we go.
Okay, so now, of course, this season is on our comic book origins, which means either the hosts or a guest comes in and say, you know what? I love comics, and here's the thing that got me in. We had Dre, you did Impulse, right?
Great. Started
did-
strong,
DC versus Marvel last month.
got mediocre.
Was great.
It was great. It
So
was a
great.
great episode.
I
And now
liked it.
we're doing Youngblood.
Ending. Not
Oh yeah,
great.
with a
Boy,
thud here.
Shit rolling downhill in this season. I don't think we've ever had a decrease in quality more. And I think I will say a decrease in quality more, but with apologies to DC versus Marvel and the creators that they were trapped in a very specific box that they had to work through. And they did the best they could with what they had, starting with a Mark Waid written sidekick sort of new hero series, then going to DC versus Marvel, which is a desperate cash grab, and then going to Youngblood, which is riding the wave of storytelling mediocrity with zeitgeist grabbing art. Mike, why?
All right.
Book that brought you into comics.
I gotta defend this at somehow. I did not come here to defend Youngblood itself, but
You don't have to.
the prompt that I did get was to tell my origin story of how I got into comics. And I gave Dre this answer over email that was spawning. Oh, I used to read Archie and Mad when I was little and came up. And then the thing that finally got me in the comic store after little bits of, Jim Lee X-Men, I'd picked that up at a bookshelf stand at one point because everyone was talking about it. From there, I grabbed a little bit of X-Force. And I heard finally through actually my dad, who was reading about speculator stuff in the news all the time, that, hey, there's this big one coming out that's a whole new line of comics that you can get it on the ground floor with. And that was Youngblood. And that got me into a comic shop for the first time.
That is fascinating. And honestly, I'm going to be 100% honest with you here. I do not think you're the only person. There's a good chance you're not the only person listening to this show right now, right? That is also agreeing with this. And I'm going to give a brief history of the creation of Youngblood. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Marvel started having a lot of new and unique artists coming in and doing incredible work. Now, have there been artists at Marvel doing incredible work, unique work consistently? Yes, Bill Sienkiewicz is a great example of that. However, there is definitely a thing that was considered the Marvel style, which would be closer to like your classic Silver Age, John Romita, the kind of stuff you'd see on a lunchbox. That kind of had the vibe. And then you had these superstar artists coming in, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, who are these very capturing the moment, elevating the style of artwork, but they realized that they could kind of self-unionize because they're doing all this work for Marvel, right? Like Todd McFarlane creates Venom for Marvel, right? Or co-creates it, I guess, right? And he's just like, all that, and I'll draw a picture of Venom for a t-shirt. His famous thing is they don't even give me the shirt.
Yeah, because you would have paid so much more for just one poster at a time than anything you did in a comic book too.
Can I ask a question on that in terms of creators? Because you're going to give us some more history. I'm looking forward to this. Of course, I can go look at Wikipedia too, but that's what this show is here for, Jeff, for us to learn. Did they take the writers with them? Because that's what's fascinating.
No, they did not take a writer. No.
Well, Chris Claremont ended up writing a book. I believe it was called Dooms 4. Like Chris Claremont came in their later wave because Image got first. There's a couple of waves that came in. So the original first run was going to be Todd McFarlane's Spawn, Jim Lee's Wildcats. You had Jim Valentino's Shadowhawk, which we've done, and I must break you on that. And it is woof. You also had, this got delayed for personal reasons, but whilst Portasio's Wetwork was going to be in there, and that got delayed by several years, Mark Silvestri's Cyberforce. People seem to forget about is Cyberforce because
I remember more from all the Top Cow stuff later on too.
Yeah, because he left Cyberforce behind him when Witchblade was created. That became really the cash cow, and of course Rob Liefeld's Youngblood. Now there's gonna be a couple of waves coming in sooner, within a few months. You're gonna start getting Sam Keith's The Max, Dale Keown's Pit. Yep, very good.
Yep.
Oh, did I mention Eric Larson's Savage Dragon in that first run?
No, but that was part of that original. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was in that original run as well. Eric Larson's, I think, is probably the closest thing to what you would consider a cohesive storytelling. And that is because he had a lot more experience writing and drawing. Todd hadn't done a ton, but Todd had done 16 issues of Spider-Man, including that best-selling comic of all time for 2 months, Spider-Man #1. So he did that Torment story. Spawn's, he got better. Oh, but we're not talking about those books so much. But that became a big division, right? Creator rights versus company and IP and all this stuff like that. And Marvel was, of course, situated as the bad guys. And you had it's a very David and Goliath story. Marvel's good luck, best of luck to you. And it's like, they did fine.
I think one thing that what kept coming back and all the stuff I read and all of the documentaries I was looking through on this, they all worshipped Kirby and took on this extreme Kirby good, stand bad mentality to the point where they were like Liefeld was looking at one point to the legalities of saying Jack Kirby presents on all Image titles early on.
Yeah. And that's one of those things too, where most creators are siding on the Jack Kirby part of that disagreement. Stan Lee gets a lot of credit for a lot of work he didn't do. And I do not love speaking ill of the dead, but I am very poised to say, even when I worked at Sideshow and we had a Stan Lee toy, and in the script they would give me would say creator of this, and I would change the script to co-creator every time. Because I refused to participate in the erasure of all the actual work that was going on in there.
One of my favorite takes on that is actually Bill Burr talking Steve Jobs. And I absolutely love that point where we have a problem in culture. And there's actually a quote from Babylon 5, Jeff, one of my favorites.
Oh,
which is,
it took us, I know that's not the back catalog, but
big surprise. But the quote, by the way, Jeff, is the quiet ones change history. The loud ones take the credit.
Yeah,
and
we're
so
noticing, we can point to Bill Gates and all these other people about that, but I think the reality is we have a very famous person right now.
A bunch. That's the problem is when we about the change, it's gotten worse and worse. It's like Steve Jobs, you could make the argument, could do some stuff. Stanley was, he was talented. He just took more credit. And we get to the point where being loud trumps, pun intended, any other skills.
I think Elon Musk is the biggest example of that. That motherfucker has not invented a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't care what names he has on what patents. That he didn't do that. He didn't. Which is the irony, of course, of, buying and taking credit for Tesla when he is absolutely an Edison is a very funny thing. But anyway, I don't want to get too political about how much of a huge piece of shit Elon Musk is. Basically, what this comes into is it's like company versus creators. And a lot of creators really bought into that. And you had famous clashes. The most famous of that era was Todd McFarlane versus Peter David. These men did not love each other. They worked together on Hulk for a little bit. Peter David, company guy. We've seen this happen a lot. We've seen it go through. Robert Kirkman and Brian Bendis had similar debates about, working for a company versus your own creator owned title. And we've all interacted. Bendis they all started in indies, and some went to Marvel and loved it. Some went to Marvel and were like, this is a terrible deal. I'm moving on. That's a famous thing. Eventually, things like Jim Lee's Wildstorm, which started out as Homage Comics, ended up getting bought by DC. So that world is actually absorbed into the mainstream DC universe. So that
was one of my big introductions to this style of comics later on too, because I started reading all that Stormwatch and the Authority stuff that they came out with later.
Brilliant. I think the Authority might be one of the best created Wildstorm books in history. And I'm really glad that we're going to be able to see some of that in James Gunn films. But Youngblood, Rob Liefeld. Let's talk Liefeld, because this is very important.
Oh, good. We're taking even more time to get to Youngblood, which I love. Let's talk some Liefeld.
We can't dip our toes into Youngblood without understanding a couple of very important things. Number one, Rob Liefeld has an interesting and unique style of artwork that fans criticize because it's funny to do that. However,
I could never draw like that, though. I keep thinking that the whole time I'm looking at it.
Style is style. And as I get further away from that, I've had this conversation before. I find Alex Ross to be incredibly talented and incredibly boring. I think Alex Ross is boring. I think he's one of the most talented people in comics. But that's not interesting to me to see here's what Reed Richards would look like as a dude. Like, we've had movies, right? Rob Liefeld, he drew, his version of drawing is essentially 80s excess. And that is actually something that's very, because I want to talk about like the socio-political implications of these books as well. We're going to get weird on this fucking
I
show.
love it.
But okay, so Rob Liefeld comes in, and there are artists that come in that change like the landscape of comics. And Rob Liefeld is one of them. Whether you like it or not, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, these men, these three specifically, had copycats everywhere.
Yeah. Everything looked like their style for the next 10 years.
Mark Silvestri can't really have copycats in the same way because a copycat of Mark Silvestri looks like Jim Lee's style. Because, and by the way, every one of the image creators will tell you Mark Silvestri was the best artist in that. Like, just
he was talking, well, some of those interviews with him, he specifically said, I've already conquered every world I've wanted to do with Claremont. Anything else I did with my career was gravy at that point. And he still looks like a young guy, like looking at interviews today.
6'7" too.
Yeah.
He is a massive, beautiful, talented man. That dude is incredible, right? So like, it's super popular to shit on Rob Liefeld, who is a man that I consider a friendly acquaintance. There are people in this world that I have relationships with that I do not consider friends because I think that oversteps a boundary. The funniest thing about it is he loves me in person. He has blocked me on almost all form of social media. Very funny. He definitely gets in his feelings on a lot about his stuff. He has a lot of opinions, doesn't like dissent. Kind of gives me the Lou Ferrigno vibe where I can totally understand why after people are annoying you for a certain period of time, you're going to have some asshole tendencies because of that, right? But Rob Liefeld shows up, takes over New Mutants. New Mutants, that was like a pretty middling book, other than the Bill Sienkiewicz Demon Bear stuff from before. New Mutants was like a dying book, which it never should be, because New Mutants is what if the X-Men happened again? You know, we need a new generation of X-Men. We can't just always have, you know, Cyclops being like, oh, with the power of my optic blasts, I could share. It's fucking boring. We needed new stuff. But New Mutants was just dying, floundering, falling apart. They show him up, they bring him in, and all of a sudden it becomes a crazy selling book, right? Now, ownership is a whole ass thing because Weezy Simonson is a co-creator of a lot of these characters that he claims full creation of. It's sort of it's the reverse Stan Lee, where he's like, characters I created them. She's like, you drew them and you gave me a general idea of what their vibe is, but I still have to create a personality for these people, right? And all this stuff. So Rob is, you know, he brings Cable in, New Mutants 87. Great cover. Why is it such a great cover? Todd McFarlane inked it, and Todd McFarlane's actually a better inker than he is a penciler, even though he's a great penciler. His ink. So no, he's famously like one of history's greatest inkers in comics. He's a great penciler. He is an untouched inker. We're talking like guys, you know, I mean, if you were to put maybe Jimmy Palmiotti and Dexter Vines.
I get not to get it, but what sets them apart? Because I really like you had a comment in a recent opening where you were showing the card that had bad inking on it because it was showing chest hair where it should have been plate metal through like the Punisher.
That's bad coloring.
Okay,
so
okay.
That comes down to your color, and that comes down to your color guides. So whoever was making the color guides would have screwed up. That happens a lot of times too. You got to remember, comic artwork was shipped through FedEx. And stuff happens. Eric Larson just shared a very great sort of thing about how he sent in the Amazing Spider-Man when he was fighting the Tri-Sentinel, the Zipatone, which is like the background. Zipatone is background shading, almost like a color form that you could put onto your artwork to have a consistent shading aspect. Zipatone's like a very important part of comic art creation, right? And some of the Zipatone got damaged in shipping. So when it arrived, they fixed it. Like the publisher or whoever was like the printer, they actually noticed the problem and fixed it. However, when they did the reprint run that just happened, they didn't use that run, but they actually went through his original artwork. So the one that got published is the one that's missing a chunk of Zipatone. And he was just, I don't know, man. There were so many ways to do this, but also I understand that when you're trying to reprint 300 pages of something that can be difficult.
You know what it's like, Jeff? Like Babylon 5, some of the original
okay.
prints
That's
in
enough.
DC are not around. And so when they're re-releasing them, they don't look as good as when they came out of the air. That is a true story. Continue, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay. So we have this setup here where, and it really is, Todd McFarlane is spearheading the split because Todd McFarlane is, of them all, maybe the most financially acute, minus spending millions of dollars on McGuire and Sosa baseballs as an investment, but also he had the money. Todd did something that I think a lot of people don't do when they come into money. He didn't let the money necessarily change him. He just used it to elevate his hobby, which I think is really interesting. He loves hockey. He bought a chunk of the Oilers, of the Edmonton Oilers, and their third jersey was the Spawn logo.
Yeah, he's the guy from that 7 that went on to make the biggest, most successful company, if you don't count what Jim Lee's doing right now. But
I mean, Jim Lee, it's hard to say that because they've been bled in, but Todd McFarlane knew very soon that if you made high quality toys in an era where toys were garbage, you were going to get really great licenses. And he did.
He was able to get to that market because he saw that. He was the one who had the business sense of that.
I always associated McFarlane, interestingly enough, with video games because, at Electronics Boutique, etc., they would have the expensive McFarlane toys, behind the counter. They would sell those too. And that's still a model they keep up, the toys and video games. So I do remember that. Those were I worked at Target. We didn't have McFarlane toys there. They had them there. And now full circle, I take my kid to the store and when I used to shop at Target, haven't in months for reasons. He did buy a Todd McFarlane Necron toy because he had the DC license.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's an awesome toy. It is.
They had
ridiculous.
the DC license up until earlier this month.
Really?
Yeah, it was I think Mattel or Hasbro just got the DC action figure license back. We'll see. Again, not terribly important to that point, but it is one of those things where McFarlane's really good at knowing how to make money. And that was the thing where he's like, look, guys, we're doing all this work and we're not making money. And I can attest to you, right? They were making 6 figures at Marvel, right? Low 6 figures annual. That's really good for 1990.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I will tell you a conversation that I had with an unnamed original image creator at a party when it was a little bit looser. And we were talking, and I had mentioned all the merchandising and stuff in Image and about how much I was how it changed the scope of the thing. And he goes, here's the thing that a lot of people don't really think of is that because we were the owner and publisher of our own books, right? Our commission was just pure profit. Everything that was profit directly to us. And we decided how it went. If I have a big, huge studio, I have to pay more people out, right? He goes, but our books were $1.95. And after printing costs and all this stuff like that, you're talking, you're profiting 75 cents a comic book, $1 a comic book, right? And he goes, we're selling a bare minimum of 600,000 books. So Rob, we'll go back to Rob now, right? Rob New Mutants, and they're all right, well, we want to start a new book, X-Force, right? Because we're starting to dip our toes into the sort of more extreme evolved form of this, right? It's highly stylized art and blah, blah, blah. And so we go from New Mutants to X-Force. They become more of a paramilitary organization. It's fine. It is what it is.
I mean, that's looking back, that seems that first X-Force few issues just kind of set the tone for that first wave of Image, it seems.
Yes. Well, they all
just
wanted to do. And you can see it. You can really see how these creators were doing their stuff. Larson doing Spider-Man and doing that Revenge of the Sinister Six book and dealing with all these nightmare characters all at the same time. And you can see that in Savage Dragon. And I mean, sorry, but Spawn just looks like the Prowler. But it's, deep and dark and in the depths of hell and all that stuff. And Jim Lee doing Wildcats, which is, covert X-Men,
lots of guns, not as dark.
It's a dwarf, right? A slightly different version of the same thing or whatever, right? Same thing.
Too many pucks versus too many cables.
Yes.
Nice reference.
So X-Force shows up and it does numbers. You got to remember at this time, right? We're talking, there are 3 books that are breaking records, right? It's Spider-Man #1, right? With that iconic cover of him in the webs with all the spiders around.
That Todd. X-Men.
X-Force #1, polybagged with 1-5 cards. Pray you don't get Sunspot and Gideon. Then you have X-Men #1.
Okay.
5 different covers, right? A through D.
And that's Jim Lee, right?
Has all of them. That's Jim Lee, right? I mean, blowing numbers away. The sales figures are insane on these books. And they start to realize this kind of sucks. So within a year from X-Men #1's release, you're going to see him go, right? Todd leaves Spider-Man with issue 16, but remember that dropped a little earlier than X-Force and X-Men. I believe Jim and Rob both leave around 10 or 11, although there is a Mignola filler in X-Force. And they go and they leave and they're like, all right, we're going to go do our thing. So first book, Youngblood. That's the first, I believe that's the first
beginning.
Yeah, it's the one. And we're talking, this is massive. Like the release of Youngblood, it was a cataclysm. Everybody needed it. This book was sold out. You'd see those inside and on the back covers of comics, there were like mail order comics companies and they would have prices. And Youngblood #1 immediately already had spiked prices, right? It was hard to find.
Everybody.
It was a real pain in the ass. Awesome.
I was a comic book collector from not before Youngblood, but I was a comic book reader. As soon as Youngblood came out, from then on, pretty much for the rest of my life, I have been into comic books, and I have always gone into a comic store, and I can trace that back to Youngblood.
Right. And of course, famously, I sent Dre a very famous picture from the release of Youngblood that was taken, I believe, at Golden Apple Comics on Melrose in LA, of Rob Liefeld with Eazy-E.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes.
It's a very famous pick. I mean, Eazy-E was massive. Eazy-E is the reason that all those very famous rappers left, they left.
Can you believe this? Can you believe this guy? Look.
As you're pointing out, and the bigger thing about Liefeld that you're showing here is just, he's a child, right? You're pointing him next to Eazy-E. He looks like he's a fan getting an autograph, not the person with the major comic.
He's a baby. He's in his early 20s. When this is published, because I believe that Rob was born in 1967. Right. So when you think about that, right, not 77, 87, right? That means he's 20 years old in 1987. This is published in 92, and he's been working in comics for a few years at this point in time. So if you're wondering why these characters seem derivative, shallow, flat, and pretty much unfathomably similar to each other, well, I don't know if I could have done better when I was 25.
Jeff, I have a segment on tap for what you just said, how talented, but I do have a game. I'm curious if you can do this, at least as the nexus of the show, the thing we built the show around. We did Youngblood's issues 0 through 3, which were like the first 4. I think it went 1, 2, 0, 3.
1, 2
is how it went.
It's 1, 2, 3, 0.
1, 2, 3, 0. Jeff, I've got a challenge to you, and I don't think you can do it, so I want to see, can you sum up, succinctly as the key, what the hell happened in those 4 issues?
Okay. You ready?
Jeff, I'm putting a stopwatch on, so I'm going to tell you how long it takes you. So it's not you have X long. I'm going to tell you how long you take. Ready?
So the question is, can I summarize issues 0 through 3 in a minute or less?
Sure.
No. Okay, that game is over because
12 seconds.
All right, look at that. Expert
Good
time.
job.
No, I can't. And the reason for this is because it would basically be me rambling in the same way that Youngblood does. This is very bad. It's very bad. And there are weird cuts. There are very few editor's notes that would help out a lot in a lot of these stories. It's like really fast cutting out there. So my ability to breathe in and then give a 1 minute or so breakdown of Youngblood is impossible. I could do it with Savage Dragon. I could do it with Spawn. Those stories are a little bit more cohesive. Rob has crammed so much into these books. And a lot of that is I don't know, this is going to sound, I don't mean to make this crass or blue, but like he's a 25-year-old is writing comics the way a 25-year-old would be like having sex. He's just trying to get everything done fast, hard, explosive, get that big explosion at the end, right? And there's no patience, no calm, no, and I hate to say this, no skill in the storytelling here.
I had thought was like the most indicative part of his plotting was the lead character of Shaft, who I always think of as Jeff Shaft because I couldn't keep calling him Shaft in my brain as I thought about the plot. Yeah. But he starts out as like a CIA operative who is involved in a mall assassination attempt on him. Reporters come up to him, ask what Youngblood's doing. But then later you find out, half through the comics and half through Rob himself, talking that he was the new guy on the team who wasn't recruited until after that issue. So immediately my brain went into, you're trying to make the hotshot young guy who's new on the team, but also the grizzled leader of everything. It's always that character who's leading everything. It just immediately broke me.
He was brought in to be a leader of the team, which is actually a very funny thing. And I think that it's a bit meta, but Peter Milligan kind of aped that in a satire way when he took over X-Force with issue 116 and creating that orphan character and having him be like a hired on leader, but it's because it's publicity, but it's a much more meta. It's what if Youngblood was written well? And so what's really funny about this is he's cramming in so much information, right? And it's very discordant, but it is reflective of the freedom of not really having an editor. Because an editor would come in and be like, you need to shave 9 characters out of this part of the story. Build it up. Take your time. We don't need to be introduced to 28 different costumed heroes and villains in the first.
It is what's the snake eating its own tail called?
Ouroboros.
Thank you. It's that going on this first issue, and it's so hard to try and describe it succinctly because, again, we're introduced to the team Youngblood. We're introduced to the new person, but the grizzled veteran at the same time, as Mike saying. Flip side, freaking literally, you turn the thing over and it turns out there's an away team. So this is, the X-Men, which took decades to get X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue with characters you knew who had established relationships. Youngblood from the get. Essentially, this reminded me so much of Amalgam in DC versus Marvel. Drops you in and it's just, these are characters, here are the teams. And I was like looking around going, what the hell's going on? Now it does turn out, I didn't realize this, but it comes later. Youngblood number 0 should have been Youngblood number 1. But as we're pointing out, that happens after 3 issues of the main.
I don't hate that because the thing about that too was that Youngblood number 0 came out sort of in that 3rd or 4th month, right? Of Image, or 4th publishing month, whether or not, because
it was like 9 months later, but
famously, the time between certain issues of Youngblood got out of control because, Rob was too busy buying Dodge Vipers for everyone or whatever. But so what's really interesting about this is that they were like, all right, well, we need to see what happened right before Shaft took over. I don't hate this idea of the new guy being brought in. He's the Hawkeye. He's Bullseye.
He was supposed to be Roy Harper, Speedy, right? Red Arrow, basically. It's all the
same thing.
And he's the same. He's got that look, feel, all the same stuff.
Guy who can't miss, right? The one thing about Rob is he's not particularly great at differentiating likenesses. So when you look at a lot of these characters, they basically look like one slight different off of the characters that he did before. So like on X and all that stuff. It's very funny. Actually, when
there's an issue of too many Wolverines in some panels have too many Cable. There's a lot.
I've got to shout this out. Official. MikeSlater.com. There is really official nerd stuff to go there for now because you put all your notes for this. And Mike, I'm going to say this. Whatever you do out there, people, do not read these books. You don't need to. And if you want something enjoyable, Atop the Fourth Wall by Linkara on YouTube. He does a read along. He'll show things. He's hilarious. He's a great comic mind. If you want to imbibe them that way, or go read Mike Slater's notes, MikeSlater.com. those were enjoyable. And there were multiple times, Mike, where like you would just have you be like, that's just Beast. You're like, that's a Beast there.
That's a
You're like,
Beast, yeah.
that's just Beast. It's Berserkin time. Are you kidding me? So yeah, it's Liefeld aping other people and not doing it well. So the fun thing we have with Youngblood is the comparison to the number of other nerd properties we've looked over. And so here's the problem. If you look at Youngblood, it's supposed to be a crass look at superheroes as celebrity. And what if you've got these superhero teams, but they're also nefarious in this? Problem, by the way, Watchmen did it in 1986, did it better. A run we did, Jeff, The Tick, Ben Edlund. Ben Edlund did this where he deconstructed mainstream comics perfectly in real time, right?
As
He was
a
able
kid,
to say,
by the way, as well.
yeah, and yeah, that's the point. Is like, we're like, well, Rob Liefeld was a kid. That's why he didn't do it, right? He's no Alan Moore. You're like, well, here's the problem. In the same era, in the same time, with, don't get mad at me, Rob. This may be just a personal preference. I love the Tick art much more than Liefeld, and I'd be interested to hear if you two have takes. I think it ages better. I could be wrong.
I mean, yeah, that's just a matter of taste.
Yeah, it's
It's
my
a style, yeah.
Like, I don't give Rob the artistic problems that a lot of people do because it's style. I love Sam Keith. I love Jay Lee. I love Scotty Young. None of these people are anatomically correct artists.
Yeah.
I
Scotty Young
find-
is a good comparison point too. Yeah. Because for the Tick stuff, it's more cartoony, stretchy there. It's completely different style. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I love the Tick.
Yeah.
Like, the Tick is great. I think the Tick is, as it gets its footing, a much better written. And you will find, by the way, Rob appreciates creators. That don't get sort of the wrong idea that he's this not supporter. Like, they all love Jack Kirby and they all love creators. And so Rob knows how limited his skills are in certain things. So he brings better writers on to write books. Famously, Alan Moore wrote Supreme.
But I mean, I guess the top level point, Jeff, we've got the Tick. The Tick, unfortunately, is an example of a young up and coming creator who still has some rough edges. When we did the Tick show, you, Jeff, we were both very complimentary to Ben, but we also were like, oh, he's young and he's still learning here, right? You were still able to notice some of that stuff. When we also noticed like deconstructing the narrative, of course, we have the Gremlins 2 episode of Nerd, where we have creators that are able to do this stuff. So the problem in reading Youngblood is it's a fan of the genre who is pretty talented. He is a talented artist, and I'm actually going to agree with that. There are some frames in these comics that are absolutely ridiculous.
He also clearly has swiped himself on a lot of these, by the way.
Well, I
I
mean,
can show you panels in Youngblood that are also X-Force panels.
oh, so yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
did he get like, I've heard artists getting guff for that. Yeah, like using the exact
It's
same
called
thing.
swiping. Yeah. It's,
And he's doing it from himself on a lot of stuff just because they're so similar. It's easy to do.
yeah. And that, so like, Dre, I'm going to actually build off of something that you said. I'm going to go with you on this. And I don't know if it's going to be the way you think I'm going, but you want to talk about the Tick, right? And how it's this book that was created, earlier than that, but creator-owned book. I mean, it was published by a comic shop, right? New England Comics, Brockton, Mass. Shout out to the guy who had a Brockton, Mass shirt on, and we talked while I was leaving House of Secrets this morning. Here's the thing, and we're going to talk about how things hold up. Youngblood had an attempt at several media opportunities, and they all fell flat because it's not. What are you going to do with that, right? How you going to it's not a particularly exciting story. The Tick has been adapted perfectly 3 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they weren't massive hits, but they were critical darlings, and they always hold up. Like, no matter what version of the Tick, be it the animated from the mid 90s, whether you talk about the later 90s into the early 2000s, right? Patrick Warburton run.
Then the new one a few years ago.
And then the Peter Serafinowicz one, like they're all critically lauded because there is a depth to what is being offered. It is it's talking about reality. This is a comic book, like the Tick was a series that twisted, warped, and bent reality, the perception of what reality is, the perception of what sanity is, standard stuff, right? While being a brilliant parody of superhero things. This, unless he's revising his own history, is not a parody of these books. These are I'm doing my own version of the thing that I've been doing. I'm going to obviously change the story. These are government. My X-Force, they were outlaws. These ones, they're very in the law. But are they? What? And it's one of the things I find interesting, and this is where we're going to start getting sociopolitical about it. I'm sorry if I'm
Excellent.
Well, but
No, I'm in.
we don't have a choice because we didn't do blow by blow. Like issue 1 is Shaft joins the team and the other team kills Saddam Hussein. And
yeah,
in Israel.
So that's what I was going to say is like,
yeah,
there's a lot of American imperialistic jingoism that was very popular at the time and we saw that a lot. Like that, it's a lot. It's USA, right? Like it's happening all the time. At the same time, Sergeant Slaughter was an Iraqi sympathizer in the WWF and had to fight Hulk Hogan for the championship and all that stuff at WrestleMania 7. Like all this like stuff, like that was a big thing at the time, right? When you look at like the vigilante style characters and you look at sort of like the Bernie Getz, if you're familiar with that story from, in the New York subway in the 80s and this a guy who's a vigilante, somebody tried, like a teenager tried mugging him and he gunned him down, right? He gunned the guy who tried mugging him. And it was this big thing of, is extrajudicious vigilante murder good? And some people were like, hell yeah, man. And some people were like, maybe we should be fixing this problem, right? And you can see a better example is that it's Jim Valentino's Shadowhawk, which is essentially like,
I think it was just Batman with
the law is broken, and so we need cruel vigilantes to prevent any of that. It's not like Batman where it's like they can be rehabilitated. It's like I broke their spine.
Yeah. That's clear for the first panel of Shadowhawk, where he clearly goes through the guy's spine with a punch.
And to be clear, as we mentioned, again, keeping on these first couple of comics, the first 3 issues of Youngblood start with a normal comic you read through. And then if you flip it over, there's an extra comic. And one of Shadowhawk is just like coming soon. It was a gimmick.
Up after the first one, though, because they just do promos. Yeah.
I'm going to explain that. Issue 1 is a flip book that Rob got to take his time to build and have ready out there. So he did a home team side and an away team side.
Yep.
Bob is realizing that he does not have the time nor the full-on ability to do a full-on 22-page book. He just doesn't have it in him to get it out on a monthly release schedule. That's why somebody like Weezy Simonson or Fabian Nicieza would write the books and be like, draw this, right? It's a lot of, that time is important, right? Being a creator, an important, like a self-creator, very hard, especially when you're trying to do all this detailed work. You can see when he is running out of time, backgrounds will disappear.
Yeah, as the musician, it's easier to just go up and do a set of covers than it is to build a fan base, build your own music, to do your own thing. Yeah,
right. Absolutely. So what you see is in the second one, they become little previews. Like the issues 2 and 3 basically have previews of books. Issue 2 is a preview of Shadowhawk, which was about to come out, which was weirdly the most valuable book that had come out at the time. It was the number one. Shadowhawk did gimmick covers, which Youngblood, Spawn, Wildcats did not do right away, right?
Would you say Shadowhawk was the most, or number 2 of Youngblood?
Shadowhawk number 1 was the most valuable of the original first run Image books for a while. That book was going for $30 raw. I don't know why people.
Some kind of scarcity or fit over time. Yeah.
I don't know. It was a cardstock silver foil embossed cover.
Get one of those.
Yeah. The other part to remember too is that this was in the era where everyone was told that everything was a collector's item, and the irony of that. Sorry if you have a bunch of stuff, but if
that's how I got pushed to the comic store. My dad, I was telling him, yeah, there's this interesting comic. Well, I hear these are going to be worth something, so get 2 of them.
And the reason they heard that is because they found out that Golden and Silver Age books were selling for higher.
Yep.
So they thought comics a better value than stocks.
Some people with too much money had grown up and had still in the comics.
And take a drink, Mike Slater, because we addressed that in the DC versus Marvel episode with Michael Vincent Brantley last.
I do have to shout that out. A fun shout out to that episode as well. Jeff beat me to it, but I guess you have to take a double shot, Mike. House of Secrets, your local comic shop, Jeff, is how you got the DC versus Marvel. And Leland told me a hilarious story, which is they had a fan appreciation night where they were eating pizza. and they were out of paper plates. And he said, true story. So I believe him. He said, true story. The owner was like, you know what you do? I have a bunch of Youngblood #1s. You can just use those. And funny thing as well, I went into the store with Jeff and said, hey, do you happen to have any Youngblood? And he was like, what did you say to me? And I said it a couple more times. He goes, this is like Beetlejuice. You're going to invoke Rob Liefeld right here. He said that was the most anybody has said Youngblood in the store in years. And then, of course, I think all of us, Jeff, I found Youngblood numbers 0 through 10, as well as 2 additional #1s from extra other printings or other runs of Youngblood for $1 an issue, $10 on eBay. And that was probably high. I think I just played sticker. So it's just in terms of keeping their value.
They were $195 when they came out. So.
They were. Some of these have $250 because they might have been the special covers, Jeff.
Would you get a strike file?
I don't know, Jeff. I'll
Strike
take a look
Force
after
or
the show.
whatever.
But yeah, it's just, I have $25 of comic books in 1995 that I was able to purchase for $15 in 2025.
Spawn has rebounded. Spawn has been continuously published. Savage Dragon and Spawn have not skipped a beat. They might slow down their production runs, but those 2 books have continued. Spawn, obviously incredibly popular. Savage Dragon's one of those ones where Eric Larson says, I made my money. I just want to make comics for the rest of my life, and that's what I'm doing. And
that's always been his too, hasn't it? Like,
yes. And on top of that, not only that, but they did a book swap about a year or so in the Image that all the creators did an issue of the other person's book. So Jim Lee did an issue of Savage Dragon. Eric was like, sure, we'll call that 13A. And then I'm going to go back to publish because this is my story and I'm not letting anybody.
This is an Elseworlds. We're just going to leave it at that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a diverting parallel space. And he's nothing against Jim. He's incredibly talented, but
it's my book.
No, I have my story to tell, and he's been going for quite some time. Savage Dragon is still being published. Same thing as Spawn. And Savage Dragon has not stopped. Spawn has slowed down or waited a little while. Todd learned pretty quickly that he needed Greg Capullo to do more, which is funny because, Greg Capullo was Rob's replacement on X-Force. And then
I didn't realize that.
Todd liked him so much that he pulled him in. So when you look at the Violator, Angela miniseries, those are Greg Capullo's art, and then Greg Capullo ended up being the regular Spawn artist.
Wow. Yeah. Well, Angela's the interesting one. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but that's another character that
we don't really want to talk about that lawsuit and other co-creator who everybody was on the side of until very recently when they found
exactly. But I was just thinking of that character in particular. We were talking earlier about how Todd McFarlane had the big problem early on with not having rights to comics and kind of flipped after a while.
Well, the thing about it is that, it's creator-owned book, right? And they were all about if somebody creates a character, that's their character. So, of course, the Angela character, because they didn't have copyrights set up the way they normally would, Neil Gaiman created the Angela character, and there was a very long lawsuit over that Neil ended up winning, and then I believe he sold the character to Marvel.
Yep, she's just our sister now.
Yeah, she's a very interesting character. It was a weird choice. I think she first came back in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, it was Guardians in the 2015, 2016 on there. Yeah.
But I digress, right?
Yeah.
Pardon me. That speaking of Peter David, right? But I digress was the name of his comics buyer's guide, I think was the
Wreck of Lamb. I remember that.
His thing, right? Because Todd had a Wizard magazine. Todd had a Wizard magazine column.
Really?
Yeah, he did. It was him just talking about the business.
Hey, Jeff, this isn't Drink from the Back catalog for you, Mike, but future one. Wizard magazine in some capacity at some point would be fun to talk about.
So, I'm glad you brought that up. What if we talked about Wizard magazine right now? And we can talk about the importance of Wizard magazine to the success of Youngblood. Dre, does that sound good to you?
All right. You still might be on the hook for a full episode in the future, but this is a nice teaser. I'll take it.
Oh, yeah, I'm in it.
Wizard magazine was considered the tastemaker in comics at the time. It was mostly mainstream except for Palmer's Picks. The now defunct YouTube page, Cartoonist Kayfabe, used to do a great sort of a rundown of those. And unfortunately, some really horrible things happened with one of the creators that was on that show, and he is no longer with us. But because of his own decisions, by the way. But Wizard Magazine was a tastemaker. And Wizard Magazine, as much as they want to say they were like these balanced comics journalists, it was very pay to play. It was, if you buy an ad, we're going to talk about your books, right? If you buy an ad, and Rob Liefeld famously was licking the boot leather of Garib and Stephen Seamus. He knew exactly what to do to get coverage, and he did. And if you look back, you'll see Rob Liefeld would be talked about all the time in Wizard Magazine. Here's how much of an important part Wizard Magazine was. You can see in one of these issues, Bedrock, now named Badrock because of the Hanna-Barbera lawsuit, is seen reading a Wizard Magazine.
Yep. I remember that image. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that was an important thing. Like Wizard was such a massive, culturally important piece of comics media for 2 decades.
Do all of the listeners know Wizard used to be almost kind of like a Beckett, so like value of comics, but as well as articles on what was coming up, the pop culture back in the day before the movies were big. Oh, this movie might be including this person. Giveaways, letters to the editor. People would ask silly questions.
Oh yeah, I remember going through an issue and just like doing the X-Men casting before the X-Men coming out. There was always speculating throughout there.
Yeah, but what they cast Michael Biehn as Cyclops.
Yep, that was a famous one. Who was the Wolverine? Was it
Danzig?
Was always. Yeah,
I liked Emma Frost was Rebecca De Mornay, which I really liked. Regardless, okay, so right, Image Comics and Wizard Magazine had a symbiotic relationship because Image was hot and sexy and it was going. So early issues of Image Comics, you'd have the Spawn cover, you'd have the Wildcats cover, you'd have the Youngblood cover. And that was very important. There's actually an Image cover that was super controversial because Rob drew Shaft from Youngblood and Cable on the cover. Yes.
Yeah.
Marvel was not happy about that. Marvel was like, we are doing a lot of work for you, Wizard Magazine. The balls that you have to do this. And they were like, look, man, we're doing our thing, right? I think the rise and fall of Wizard Magazine would be really great for a Toy Galaxy or Secret Galaxy or something like that. I wonder how long we'd be able to distill it down because I have a lot of opinions. I got engaged at a Wizard Comic-Con, by the way. So in case you're wondering, I got divorced at a courthouse. I've had interactions with the Seamuses. Never good. I've met some of my closest friends at Wizard World Cons. Tom Whalen, Dave Perillo, Scott Derby, J.G. Jones, people who've been on the show, like really incredible talents. I met them at Wizard Cons. They're important to me. Also, Wizard they were pretty diabolical in how they did business. And it was very pay to play. So Rob knew that. So they created, and Image did as well, but a symbiotic relationship of saying Wizard Magazine, which Marvel did not really have the clearance to do because there were so many editors, like Bob Harris or whoever was the editor at the time. It's just like, we're not doing that. We're not going to embarrass ourselves. We're not going to demean ourselves.
That's hilarious for Marvel to be there in the early of the 90s. And then you look at what Marvel did at the end of the 90s to try and make money. Like, we're not just going to sell ourselves for money.
Marvel's saying we're not going to demean ourselves while releasing 5 connecting covers of the same comic is a little ironic. And also, really pushing characters that were going nowhere because they were like, well, we need new stuff, right? Very funny, very fun stuff, right? Youngblood, the story is rooted in Operation Desert Storm style jingoism, right? It's the same as it was a popular war in America.
Yeah, he was taking a jingoistic soup and just putting it all together in every way he could think of, just slopping it down.
But also what I do is that he was aware enough to understand government overreach and also the idea there's a very Platoon scene in Image number 0. It might as well just be Platoon where basically
in Youngblood 0?
In Youngblood 0, yeah.
You said Image 0, but
which by the way, you could get the certificate coupon to exchange for an Image 0. I believe that was through I think Youngblood 0, Shadowhawk 2 or 3, Wildcats number 4. one of the spawns. There was like, if you bought one of each image issue, you could get
the zero sent in with the box tops for it.
which you can now get for $8. So
Yeah. Yeah, but there's like the platoon scene was like they had the guy that was leading the Youngblood early team came in and killed one of the other guys just in the middle.
The guy covered in skull emblems.
Yeah.
And you killed that guy extrajudiciously. I don't know if you noticed how I'm dressed, but
I have a skull in the middle of my forehead. What do you think I was going to do?
it's also very poorly written.
Oh my gosh. Went for the first part. His character design of him out in the battlefield towards Slater when they show him in the prison, he was giving the pit villain smile with the millions of Liefeld teeth.
Yeah, Liefeld really liked drawing infinity teeth in people's mouths.
Yes.
It was very interesting. And again, it's all style, but sometimes you're just like those. If you saw a person with Rob Liefeld teeth in real life, they would be the scariest person you've ever met.
Live action Babadook in front of me.
A mouth with 80 teeth on, the top and bottom, right? But so it's like one of those things where Youngblood ends up being this cultural phenomenon for a very short time. And the reason it's for a very short time is one of the things that whenever people talk to me about podcasts, it's the same reason Youngblood failed quickly is for the same reason I give people to not bother with a podcast if they can't follow this rule, and that is consistency.
Mhm.
The publishing schedule of Youngblood was bad. Rob tried growing too fast, too small, not worrying about, you have Image, you have Brigade coming right up after that. You have Youngblood Strike Force, you have Youngblood Strike Files. You have all these different, but you have Prophet coming out. Like you have all these different books that he's setting up to make his own like Marvel universe. He's kind of like the DCEU.
Yeah.
He's trying to do too much too fast.
Yeah, I kept making that comparison. It's like we're in media res in the middle of each scene, expecting us to know this history of all these characters that barely talk to each other, and even in the fights.
I don't mind that. I don't mind putting us in the middle of the action and building from there. I don't need everybody's origin in the issue one, right?
Mhm.
Allow creators to get us there, right? I have no problem with that.
But he does not. First off, in issue 1, he doesn't get us there. One, did you both notice this? In issue number 0, possibly learning lessons. So remember, issue number 0 comes out 4th and is kind of like a backstory. And so he changes it up. They're going into a mission and they're like, here's our cast of characters. And beneath each starts listing them. He doesn't list the leader who gets captured at the end, who leads the way for Shaft to take over the team, which is just hilarious because it's going either or, Jeff, right? Either.
Well, they're also, you clearly see they're setting up that character as a future villain too.
But it's just,
they're like, we just want you to go away. And I don't think that's a good idea.
But yeah, so it's either bad foreshadowing. So it's like, you're not even being clever about if that was intentional, and sure, I'll believe you that maybe that was intentional. Or flip side, I was just confused because I'm reading, I'm like, this person, that person, this person. I was like, what about the other person? That's the next 2 frames.
I think in Youngblood number 0, what they're really trying to do, and I do believe that this was planned, to be fair, as much as I do not like the plotting of this, is clearly I'm going to give you this start and then we're going to take a break to show you how we got there. Also, issue 0s were a new and very popular thing at the time. So why not keep your interest as people are 1, 2, and 3? That's when people really start to pair off of books anyway. Like buying books, issue 1s, like historically speaking, I think maybe Walking Dead might be one of the only comics where each successive issue grew in sales. Like as far as modern comics go, like usually issue 1 is the big sell, and then people fall off or whatever, right? Rob's inconsistency. I always tell this to people when they're like, I want to do a podcast. I'm like, if you cannot keep your schedule, don't have a podcast. Just don't do it. Because if there are people that are relying on something to happen, right? That's why you'll notice on this network, on the Jeff Has Cool Friends network, if I do end up getting like a delay, I'm like, I am so sorry. Here's the thing that happened. I can't control it. I'm doing my best to get it out. It'll come out faster. But imagine that, but over months.
Yeah. Well, there's only that. How many issues of Youngblood came out? Was there 3 issues from April through December?
Yeah, it took a while. Because he was trying to run and he was 25.
I was thinking that the whole time you're talking about the issue 0. It's a great idea to come back and pull the momentum if you have a release momentum. because by the time that issue 0 came out, everyone was over the story already after a year.
I think that was a way to keep people interested. Adding an issue 0 is like, ooh, that's a weird number for a comic. I'm in.
It really felt, I can see how it could have been planned from the beginning, but it really felt like, oh, I forgot to fill in any backstory. And it could easily be seen as that too.
Yeah, it seems a little too. And by the way, the reason that I was talking about before is when Peter Milligan took over X-Force from X-Force number 116 with Mike Allred, which is one of my favorite Marvel comics of all time. He does the issue 0 and kind of issue 1 together, but better. You know, when it's like you're introduced to all these characters and they're just immediately, they get their shit destroyed immediately. And then you get the people that we're going to be following. It was brilliantly done, especially in the, 2001 when the book came out.
Is that what became Ecstatic, or was that
X-Force? It's so at 116 up to, I believe, 129 was X-Force, and then it shifted to become Ecstatics.
Yeah, because with the Peter Mulligan, it
was like another 3 years of that as well. But
that was good stuff.
It was great. Really well done, and probably one of the reasons that I think Rob really hates the book. But so we look at this, right, and Youngblood is this example of the 80s excess with the 90s creator ownership. Because if you look at it, it is an opulent book that makes no statement. It's the most shallow book. The attempts at significance are laughable a little bit. Like
naming the guy Saddam Hussein. I think that was
like, it's like Kurdam Hussein or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, is he going to sue you? Who gives a shit? Call him Saddam Hussein and kill him. Who cares?
That was definitely fascinating how they killed him, right? And like
Really
police
subtle.
brutality, and they're like, oh yeah, he killed himself, and that's the story they're going with. And one interesting point you're making, Jeff, that I noticed on some criticisms of Youngblood, et cetera, and even Liefeld, where I'm like, some of the criticism I will give people. This book is jumbled. There's too many characters. You are assuming that we're going to recognize these characters a la DC versus Marvel, but it's really like an impulse number 1. So you really should start smaller stakes and introduce us to get us invested. That being said, one of the things I saw like Linkar and others doing is like, these are supposed to be heroes and they're doing these other actions. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually kind of the point. He actually is poorly, not as well as say Watchmen, but he is making the point. I'm like, when you take the belief of the superhero and kind of ground them in how they would act in the real world with celebrity, with fame, et cetera, you'd get weird stuff. You have a state-sanctioned police that are doing overreach. And I was like, yeah, the characters are saying it. They're doing clunkily, but there are so many places to criticize this book.
Yeah.
That is not the place to criticize them.
And it's interesting too, because like you can see like the home team, right? Which is like the more main characters. You have, Die Hard.
Bedrock was in there. Yeah. They're
Bedrock. You had, which by the way, Bedrock, interesting character. It's a 13-year-old.
I thought he was 16, but yeah, he's young. He's got the Billy Batson
he's
kind
a
of
teenager. Thing. He's a teenage Hulk, basically, but without the brain of an Amadeus Cho.
Yeah.
Sorry, just cross-contaminating my businesses here, my companies. So with this, right, like they're doing a Who Watches the Watchmen thing, but you'll notice like one of the things that's good is that it's he talks about how the home team front facing. And then when you see what the away team is doing, it's much more Black Ops, assassination style stuff. Now, when we talk about designs, it's funny to me how much Rob Liefeld loves the boxing headgear design.
I joked when we started reading Jeff, there is a character named Jeff, and I was just like, it's Jeff, it's you. And then, Jeff's got, it almost does look like the head boxer. That is, of course, Shaft, the character you're going to name the archer character that shoots a bow. As you noted so many times, I think Mike, either you or Linkar noted, doesn't have string on it. He's got a stringless bow is our main.
It's a electromagnetic string, which is just saves you the trouble.
Just get a gun.
Yep.
Just get a gun then. Anyway.
So I have pulled out my boxing headgear. It's the Mexican flag, Viva la Raza. So you'll notice what it is. Like it's designed to absorb impact. And there are other ways to do it. This is what's called the sheath style. It comes down, it just protects over my ears and like my jawline. But there's also a cheek style that comes right over your cheekbones. Rob has taken boxing headgear and utilized it in the creation, like Shatterstar. Where's the boxing headgear? Shaft, where so many characters wear boxing headgear. It's funny because a lot of times they're metal, and I'm always just, oh, that wouldn't feel good if you got punched in the side of the head wearing metal headgear. But it's just so funny to see that design and how consistent he is with repeating designs, which I think is also like I'm sorry, young Rob wasn't very creative.
Can I ask a weird top level question? Because Image got in lots of legal trouble, as you're mentioning, the fight about character ownerships with Neil Gaiman, Todd McFarlane, fun bucket of, go to YouTube. There are some great videos on Todd McFarlane, the lawsuits. I mean, looking over Youngblood, Mike, with very little work, you were able to say, this is that character, this is that character, this is that character, right? And we were even pointing some of the animosity with Marvel. I'm kind of shocked.
They got as far as they did.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm more confused. I'm just like, these people all left your company fighting over ownership stuff and made their own company, which is understandable. And then you have a person who is literally going, you could basically, this is that DC character, right? Shaft is supposed to be Speedy, whatever, Red Arrow or whatever, eventually. Beast is right in the comic. Bedrock, Badrock, whatever you want to call him, looks like the Thing. Just the amount of, these look like other characters, but I mean, maybe they were just good enough how to skirt copyright, or Marvel didn't care, or I don't know.
There's actually a thing that I remember from back in the day, which was there was like the soapbox thing. They would always do like the bullpen. Marvel would do bullpen stuff, right? He would do like his Tales from the Bullpen. And I remember one of them when Image was really starting to get there, where they were like asking people how many Wolverine clones they could find in other companies. And they kind of addressed it as a bit, but clearly they were mining for legal.
Because who else had done this? Yeah.
I remember this they were clearly looking to be litigious about it.
Is that this precedent?
Yeah, it was just really funny because I remember that, where it's like they're doing that. There's a very funny panel in Darker Image #1 where we meet Blood Wolf, where the character is just Cable. Also, one of the funny things is that Youngblood at one point in time, their logo was the X-Men logo, but with a Y.
Oh my.
Clearly
I never
trolling.
saw that.
He's trolling, but it was just very funny. Hold on.
And kind of keeping in Youngblood, can I ask a top level question? Because Mike, you're almost perfect for this. You said Youngblood drew you in, and I can buy it. Some of the covers look cool. But you actually said in our back and forth pre-show that you were out by issue #2. I can see why, having read it myself, but was it just an easy jumping off point? You'd gotten to the comic book store. This had the coolest cover, was the new hotness. You read it and you were like,
when I was that age, I was reading tons of novels and books. And I don't know, something about me was trying to get more into comics. Like I was reading a lot of Stephen King and John Gershon stuff and all like Tom Clancy at the time. So when I got to the Youngblood, like I didn't feel like I needed any more than those 2 issues, because I was already exposed to X-Men. I was already had a few of the X-Force. What I thought I would get with Youngblood and Image was like a new start. Here's where it starts and here's where the story goes. And really, wait, there's back issues everywhere. There's decades of story that have been written that is really interesting. And I think that's what got me to jump ship, is just I saw Youngblood for a couple times and then went right back to the X-Force stuff. And I can go back to the Muir Island saga. What's that? I can go collect those and go back. And Image didn't have that back catalog to get me truly hooked in between issues.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. Well, it's not just that, but it's also not getting published fast enough.
Yeah.
Which is the other problem, right? Like where it's like, how long am I going to have to wait to get into a comic if it's 3 months, 4 months in between a book?
Well, the other side of that coin too with me was like, there was other issues coming out. Like I never got into Spawn or any of the other because I had Youngblood first, and that kind of soured me on anything else Image.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. There's definitely I'm looking it up now. I'm trying to find the panel of Cable in the Darker Image, but it's really funny because it's clearly
Darker Image. And it's funny. I did find the image you were talking about, Jeff, on Wizard, and that was 1992. So that was, I mean, it's funny because you did, if you rewind the tape, Rob, because I know you're listening, Rob Liefeld, Jeff said a kind of interesting comment about you there about your relationship with Wizard, but that actually seems just really savvy to understand the market, right? To understand what you should do. And to in 1992, right when your new comic's getting off, take your old character everybody knows you for, take a brand new character who does look cool. Like Shaft is a cool looking character. Like everything else about him, his name, at least for the time.
No doubt. Hey, they took that a cool name. They took Shaft.
I'll sell this, Jeff. When we were
dig
doing the DC versus Marvel episode, I brought up the Azrael Batman and how I actually didn't hate that design as a kid. And what I didn't realize, this is very much like the movie Airplane, which is a parody of another movie that is like lost to time. The movie that Airplane is parodying, I've looked it up on Wikipedia before, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Airplane is remembered forever. The movie it's parodying is lost. There's lots of times
Airport,
that
I think there was a couple of them.
Well, it's actually even more directly another black and white one from back in the day, even before Airport. Because I know Airport was in the 70s and it was popular. There's actually a movie that they literally took the plot from. I think they bought the rights to it for a very amount of money.
Oh,
It was like one of those. I actually just watched a history on Airplane, and it was like the Zuckers would watch old like late night movies, and they saw this terrible Airport movie, and they basically lifted it almost directly, but then made it a comedy.
And that's how you do it, though. You make it your own, right? But what I would just say about all of that is reading Youngblood, looking at Image, seeing all of these clones, seeing the style of the time, seeing Liefeld get full license to do what he wanted, and doing the headgear, as you're mentioning, all that. Explain that Batman. I was like, oh, I get it. It's like, at the time, I didn't get the joke because the art was actually pretty good. Whoever the artist for the Nightfall, Night's End, and Batman.
So the actual designer of that first appearance cover, that would be issue 500 of Batman, depending on which, because there's Kelly Jones, but I believe the person who designed that suit specifically, I think, is Joe Quesada.
Well, there you go.
Because he also was the creator of Azrael. So the gatefold cover, by the way, that premium cover was a Joe Quesada cover where you had classic Batman and then you opened it up and you saw it as. But the newsstand like print of it that wasn't the fancy one is a Kelly Jones cover of him like having kicked Bane's ass.
But like I said, it's good artists explain. That's the hilarity is sometimes a good artist is, I'm going to parody this. And I hear that's happened with certain music. Mike, you're a more musical knowledge person than me, but I've heard of artists before that have
Weird Al. It's called Weird Al.
Well, I mean,
Weird Al.
Thank you.
You're
Mike.
welcome.
Yes, that's what I was going for. But, artists that have been like, we're going to make fun of this tripe as a song. And then that's their most popular song. That has happened more than once. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like the artists at DC that were making fun of how the comic industry was going, that were making fun of Image and all of this for the Azrael Bat. They were too good that like me, who didn't realize what they were parodying, was like, that's pretty good. That's not half bad.
Well, it's like,
yeah,
100%.
100%.
Like RoboCop's another good example, or Starship Troopers, or any Verhoeven movie, really, which is just shot like holding a mirror up to what society thinks they want and being like, "This is what you want."
I love those movies because like you can be the smartest person and get something out of it. You can be like, look at it like a dumb person and just look at it with a different part of your brain. Those movies work on two levels, which is why so many people get them confused with the satire.
Yeah, it's so funny too. I love when people are like, no, they're trying to make RoboCop political. And it's like, you have got to be the dumbest person who has ever lived. Starship Troopers. I love that movie. It's about killing bugs. Is it? Is it really? And that's definitely one of those things now that we have seen a million times, right? We see stuff like that all the time. And yeah, so we talked about that on that episode, that Azrael Batman design is we're going to show you what you think you want and why it sucks. You want a vigilante Batman that's more like the Punisher? Do you want a guy who's armored up like an Image Comics character? Is that what you think Batman should be? And it did sort of wake a lot of people up and be like, shit, what were we thinking? Like, Batman is about good storytelling and crisp, clean, fun art. And that's what comics should be. And of course,
got Shadowhawk if you want to punch through spines as Batman.
Well, the other part of that too is like the irony that it's called Image, because it has a very Image is everything vibe to it. It is mostly style, barely substance. And it's not to say that these people didn't work hard on the books. It's just, it's so different being a writer and an artist at the same time. And some people figured it out. I think Jim Lee did a very good job of being like, all right, Brandon Choi, you need to do some work with me here. Knowing, yeah, we need that. Whereas Eric is, I'm going to do this whole thing myself because this is my baby.
Yeah.
So Youngblood is a IP farm, as you can see, right? Each issue is they're highlighting some character on the cover that they're like, you're gonna want to check it out.
Which is it seems like more of those characters should have lasted, because as this, they're so vivid looking at them. Like, I'm surprised we don't have them like Spawn.
Prophet has been a character, and Prophet was created as a side character to Youngblood, being introduced and just kind of like going wild and doing his own thing. Which also, that this is in issue 2. We're in issue 2 now. Prophet's introduction is the most contrived, poorly written, dog shit version of a Marvel Silver Age 2 heroes meeting each other and having a misunderstanding and fighting. Everybody on the team is, we need to fight this guy just because. Nobody tries to talk sense into him. And there's even one part where a guy's, well, if no one's going to talk sense, if he won't listen to sense, let's do this. Nobody said anything.
Yeah.
All just fought this dude, right? So Prophet comes in and people are like, this guy's Prophet. He's got purple and he's got gold boxing headgear. All the other guys have different colored boxing headgear. This is purple and gold. And so the funny story about that is, and there's a comics thing in there, in Marvel, Stephen Platt had taken over Moon Knight and he was considered like the new Todd McFarlane. He got 5 issues in and Rob sniped him. I mean, Moon Knight ended. But Rob pulled him in and was like, you need to draw Prophet, which I thought was really funny. A Prophet movie, like there's still stuff that comes up where Rob will be like, Prophet movies.
Prophet?
About that. Which is very funny.
Although it was funny reading it, I was just like, again, seeing other things, this is way after the fact. We're talking The Boys. I was just like, this feels Homelander, Soldier Boy-ish. And that's what's funny is it's the other problem of going back in time to early comics for me is the number of people that did it better before and since, and that makes it very hard. And it's why as a throughput to the nerd series, Jeff, this being like about origins, like Mike, another question to kind of follow up on is, as nostalgia, did any of this hold up for you?
It's all contextual. I was rereading these right now. What struck me is like what I was just talking about. The design held up for some of these. Like the stories I was inventing in my head were better than what was going on the page. Just because, we make fun of the pouches and the headgear and too many swords and guns and everywhere else, but it did something to our teenage brains at some point.
We also need to remember that wasn't derivative when it started.
Yeah.
That's the thing is like we make the jokes, and Rob makes the jokes too when he created the character The Pouch, which is a anthropomorphic collection of pouches. Like he knows the bit, but it's also nobody else had really done that sort of like Cable over accessorizing. And it's actually very funny. One of my favorite panels that's sort of like a nudge at Rob and I'm not sure who the writer was for this, but during Executioner's Song, which was a 12-part X-Men crossover in the 90s, polybagged. Each one comes with a card. Greg Capullo does Cable gearing up to go fight, and he's just covered in weapons. It's like rockets hanging off of him and, straps filled with stuff. And it's kind of funny how stupid that is, right? But it's, that Rob brought that in. Rob brought the tactical aspect to these superheroes in, whereas, look, love him or hate him, right? Captain America used to just wear a belt. Now he's got like a belt with shit on it. I know, Batman obviously has a utility belt that's famously a joke, but I mean, Rob really brought that into the mainstream of characters probably should have a few pouches on there. They got a lot of shit to deal with. Went a little overboard. Rob cannot draw guns. Every gun is the most narrow, thin, tall gun ever, but I don't know, man. It's style.
Yep.
It's, what does 3-point perspective fully matter when you sell 1.2 million issues?
Well, it's a feature, not a bug, that there are some hilarious poses in there. There is one where it looks like Jeff Shaft is like walking on his knees towards the media and just to greet them.
Yeah.
Well, I actually remember a great superhero movie that I loved, The Incredibles. One of the things about that, because that's CGI, is they actually mentioned that they would get artists for some of the scenes because physically real didn't look right. So they had characters doing things. They're like, yes, if you zoom in, there is no way the human body can do that. But if
Yeah.
we animate this the way the human body should, you're going to say that's a stupid or uninspired scene. So artists have known this forever in comics. It's a joke, right? Especially when you're going for the cleavage shots. If you go to MikeSlater.com and look at his notes on Youngblood, Mike, I love it. You actually like, look at the cleavage on this one. Oh, wow, he actually held back here. You're like, you'll give him props when he holds back on like showing off some of the cleavage.
Let it where credit's due.
Yeah.
I also love in 1992 that every superhero team had to have a Russian former Soviet blank, which I thought was really interesting. G.I. Joe did that. You know, they're like, here's Big Bear. They would always bring in, it was a great time to bring Russians in as good guys now that the Soviet Union had fallen, which I think is very funny. And they do that here with, I don't know, what's her name, like Vendetta or some stupid.
Don't you have a giant
they
V
had
on her
in
head, right,
Vogue.
too?
Is it who's the purple lady?
Vogue is the purple one.
He's like the ex-Russian acrobat, like whatever.
Yeah, I think they say that in one of the panels, but she doesn't really do much.
No, she actually, what she does is she tries, there's a panel where she's like running around being like, they paged me 5 hours ago, but I need them to know that I am not on their time, that they are on mine.
Oh,
It's like, oh, okay. Sure. Ooh, she's a rebel. Great. Just like all the other rebels in here. One of the interesting things, too, about Youngblood and about all these creators. So you'll notice what they're trying to do is trying to build early Marvel crossover connections, right?
Yeah, they're doing
there are
other
scenes-
books. They're doing working up to a universal, like an image thing. Yeah.
They get asked, you know, there's a scene where they ask Shaft, what do you think about this dragon character in Chicago?
In Chicago,
What
yeah.
do you think about the mysterious boogeyman in New York and all the like
The
stuff going
backbreakers.
on, the backbreaker vigilante, like the demon, like Spawn or whatever, right? We'll get to them. And so
Some
then you'll
sailors
see
and that they'll
crossovers,
do.
right? Bedrock shows up in Savage Dragon. You know, Savage Dragon shows up in God, what's that terrible? Darkhawk is Marvel. Why? Shadowhawk.
Yeah.
So they start trying to do all these like crossovers to really make it like really work, but it's like you guys got to build your space up a little bit first.
It was a complaint everyone had about DCEU for a while. Like they were trying to catch up to Marvel, and Marvel's doing so good. And it was like reading these Youngblood books, it felt that just supercharged, trying to shove everybody in the first issue.
Yeah. I mean, I know that the pure raw acting power of Gal Gadot is not something that you guys wanted to just gloss over. And, you know, you needed in Batman versus Superman to have her say things like, I don't know. Or in Justice League to be like, Kal-El, no. You mustn't be like that. She's a terrible actor. But so what you start to see here is Image started out really strong. It was firing on all cylinders, but unfortunately it wasn't, a lot of that first run wasn't a great way.
And I think I don't know if like we're coming out of like the end of Youngblood, but the other thing that struck me when picking Youngblood and thinking about Image is every time I've gotten out of comics for a few years, it's always an Image title. What the Image turned into now is what pulled me back into comics each time.
They're just a publisher now.
Yeah.
You know, they're a publisher like any other publisher, but books are creator owned. They'll put that out there. And now there are imprints, right? So Image was just its own thing, and then they had studio imprints, right? And so those are going to end up going like
Each of the creators had their own
like
originally.
Jim Lee
Yeah.
had Homage, which became Wildstorm.
Mhm.
Right?
Top
Mark
Cow, we
III had
mentioned, yeah.
Top Cow, right? Very good. And then, you know, within Top Cow, you had Mike Turner, who then creates Aspen. And so that kind of is its own thing. You know, people like Eric Larson didn't really care. I'm just going to
Keep doing Savage Dragon, what I do.
he's going to do my thing, man. I'm not going to do that. But so you were creating universes within this publisher that had already established that is kind of a shared universe, which makes it, but Image has always been the location to, you know, like Brian Michael Bendis had Image
Power stuff. Yeah.
Spider-Man. You can see a lot of, you know, Robert Kirkman, you know, Walking Dead was such a big deal for that. And Robert Kirkman being, and obviously, you know, he did Battle Pope first and Invincible and Walking Dead, obviously being huge, great pieces of artwork that came And it's just one of those things where like Robert Kirkman is a partner in Image now.
He was the first one after the 7 years later to be
Yeah.
actually brought in as a partner.
Yeah. Now, I would be remiss not to mention that Rob was kicked out of Image.
Yep.
So, Mike, do you want to give us a little background on that, or?
Everything I was reading about that was like a Rashomon like thing, who pointing out for who's who. But from what I can tell, there's two big sides to it. There's when him and Jim Lee went back to Marvel to do the Heroes Reborn that irked a lot of the creators, but also he was embezzling a lot of money. There's a lot of them saying that he was just paying stuff for his own things out of his own pocketbook
He
stuff.
was a
to the company money.
20-something-year-old
Yeah.
child.
And he didn't think anything of it because, hey, it's our company, it's our thing. But yeah, you're right. He was a young guy, just like he was spending more time with Tom Cruise all the time and like Eazy-E and trying to get Hollywood deals and ignoring the books too.
There were also a lot of conflicts, character conflicts. Famously, Rob tried to snipe Michael Turner from Mark Silvestri, and Mark picked up that phone and said, "I will kill you if you try to steal another one of my people again. Don't you dare."
Can I ask, this is very Game of Thronesy to get the placement, because Mark Silvestri turns out obviously one of my favorites because drew the first appearance of Jubilee.
Well, Mark Silvestri is
everything,
the best artist of that group.
Yes, Jeff,
and they'll all admit it.
But as we have established on this season of Nerd on Comic Origins, Dre's opinion on the art of Jubilee will impact the opinion of the overall thing, like it did in DC versus Marvel. So this included. So I'm on Mark Silvestri's side here for obvious reasons. Fantastic artist. Was he had come to Image, but then like we have a lot of movements in the space. So was Liefeld was sniping from Silvestri at Image, right?
This was about, because Michael Turner was the Witchblade artist. So if you look at Witchblade #1, remember Witchblade we think of Witchblade now as being this like small footnote. Keep in mind, Witchblade had a TNT series that lasted multiple seasons.
That meant a lot. He talks about that show all the time.
Witchblade and the Darkness had, there was a Darkness video game. These were still really, and so Michael Turner was an incredible talent, and unfortunately we lost him way, way too young. So he was there and he was hammering away on his Top Cow stuff, and Rob tried saying, well, why don't you come over to Extreme Studios? We'll pay you even more. And Mark is, first off, you're lying to this kid. Second off, I do not believe you have the output that can do that. And third off, don't you ever try to steal. Like, they were famously not fans of each other. Now, I do want to talk about sort of the impact of Youngblood and Image Comics, and more specifically, the impact that you are going to see among all other comic companies. Now, Dre, you addressed this already with Batman, Azrael Batman, right? The Nightfall to Night Quest to Night's End run where they had that. But like there are cataclysmic changes that occur because of the publication of Youngblood #1 and the creation of Image Comics as a whole. But remember, Youngblood #1 was the first. It allowed a platform. It let people get previews of stuff. It was very significant. It's so much more significant than it is good. So we talk about that. When you look at what Marvel is doing in 1993, 94, because of a result of that, look at where the art style is going.
Everything is following them.
Cross-hatching is going to become more squinted angular eyes are going to be coming out. Like the armored versions of that. Look at they're revamping every character. Look at what has to happen. Superman is killed. Green Lantern goes crazy. Right? Like all these different things that are happening in order to give Wonder Woman a leather jacket.
But gonna do my man JMS dirty there. But yeah, that did happen.
But you remember who the artist was, right?
I don't. Who was that?
It's Mike Deodato Jr. that did that kind of like modernized version of Wonder Woman and Mike Deodato Jr. is clearly a more Image style artist at that time. So they were like, we need our versions of that.
Was that when Aquaman got the hook too? Or?
Oh boy, Aquaman got his hook. I am trying to remember the name of the artist. There was a classic Silver Age artist who could not get work. A legend, and I want to say, if it was Carmine Infantino. There was some artist, and I'm genuinely forgetting who it is, but it's a name where you're like, oh shit, this is incredible. That had really cut his teeth in that 70s style of artwork, right? The 60s, 70s, like silver, even post golden and Silver Age stuff. That decided he needed to change his style to make it look more imagey. Like, that's a real thing that happened. Stephen Platt got put on Moon Knight because they were like, we like that you are basically Todd McFarlane, and we're going to put you on there. So it's very rare that you had people start sticking with their own stuff. Now, you did have great artists doing great stuff at that time. Mark Bagley was not changing his stuff. John Romita Jr. was finding his voice and may or may not have been influenced by the superstar artist concept to say, I don't need to just be John Romita Jr. literally. I can have my own style. So you start to see a shift from John Romita Jr. being just aping or
company style,
the style of John Romita Sr. into when you start looking at like his Uncanny X-Men Fatal Attraction stuff and you start looking at like his Daredevil stuff, it becomes much more stylized.
I mean, I remember picking up, what was it, like Planet Hulk or one that he did later on even, and just, that's his art by that time, like in the late 2000s.
That's a very common, it's a result of this. Now, on top of that, Dark Horse Comics creates its Legends imprint, which is a creator-owned version. Let us publish your creator-owned stuff. So you have guys like Art Adams, so like Sin City, Monkey Man and O'Brien, Madman by Mike Allred, all these like very important Hellboy by Mike Mignola. Because Dark Horse was afraid that these people were just going to go to Image. So they're like, we've got Image at home. And they called it the Legends imprint. That was a big deal. Vertigo titles started getting more of a push in the 90s into the 2000s because that independent, more mature style was getting more popular. The other part of that is that the most significant thing that Image Comics represents is the crash. It is not Image Comics' fault, but they are emblematic of the problem.
Yeah, it's because the stuff they were doing that everybody else was doing at the same time. Not that they didn't start the bags and boards and everything, but they are definitely responsible for rising it to another level with everybody.
Yeah, you can't say, they're the problem when Marvel was the one producing 5 covers of X-Men #1 and 5 different trading cards per X-Force #1. And, a platinum, a green, a gold version of Spider-Man #1, right? Yep. These are all things that these other companies have done as well. But what happened was between the speculator market, which Image Comics was a huge part of, people were speculating every time. Like, how many times have you come across Brigade #1? It's just like a thing. So then Dark Horse starts doing, we need to do that. And then Valiant is doing it. And like all these different companies, and they're pouring style, but you cannot hold on to a readership with style. That only gets you so far. That's
once you have a couple of the style, it didn't matter if there's nothing else to keep drawing you in too. It's like, I had a couple of these, it's gonna be the same thing again.
What's a good story? What does that matter? Now, do I love all of the art of I don't want to use that. We'll say something like a great version of that might be Fables by Vertigo, right? Bill Willingham.
Okay.
And, it is a book that has a decidedly 80s Vertigo style of artwork, right?
Yeah.
Not aggressively stylized. You wouldn't say, the images are popping from the pages, but it is perfect storytelling through the art. The sequentials are good. The work is good. Is it flashy? Is there armor? Is there 50 guns on each? No,
it was flashy in a different way though, too.
But that's how we get rebounds. So the 90s was the decade of the artists, and that failed. And indies that were selling were still doing good. Jeff Smith's Bone was still doing, really great numbers. That's another one of those books where it kept, the publication kept going up there. Famously, Dave Cerebus, excuse me.
Cerebus, yeah.
Boy, did that fall off. But like you had consistent books that were still doing okay. And they were usually indie books, Strangers in Paradise and Usagi Yojimbo and all these things.
That would, by the way, shout out another future nerd, Usagi Yojimbo, Jeff, had a bunch of those graphic novels when I was younger. Even those kept their value. So not just the, not just the comics themselves, but even like the collected trades. Some of the first printings of those I kept, and even those started going up in value in the 2000s. Fantastic stuff. Amazing artist. Stan, just a good Stan.
Yeah, Stan Sakat is great. I have an Usagi #1 with an Usagi remark on it by Stan that I got for $5 at Comic-Con.
Hey, Jeff, I'll give you 10.
Sold. I'm doubling my money.
How it works, right?
I will say this, though, on that, I recently sold a couple of very important comics to House of Secrets because somebody had robbed them. They had a smash and grab scenario, and I was like, all right, well, let me help you fill the wall with some stuff that you can sell. And one of the things I sold, which has already been gone, but was a TMNT #5 first printing. And I didn't get it. The offer was it was comic shop offering. I could easily get more for it if I sold it on my own. But also I found it in a 50-cent bin at the con in Massachusetts at, the Boxborough Holiday Inn or something like that. And I was just like, all right, well, I'm not going to worry about what I could get for it right now.
What you did get
$79.50.
We do love, we've said their name a bunch of times on the show. They don't need this podcast to prop them up. House of Secrets, though, is an amazing comic shop. I will say this. Gave my son his first comic. It was, I think, Garfield #3, based on one of the movies coming out. We got it for free because Friend of Jeff. It was the Friend of Jeff discount. So House of Secrets, we absolutely love. If you are in the area, for whatever reason, you wind up in the Burbank area. Let's say you're going to see the Minton Card Show. House of Secrets, if you've got time to stop off, is a great destination.
They are. They're a great local comic shop. They are small but mighty in a really good comic shop way. And when you look at stores like That's Entertainment, which I worked at back in Massachusetts, or unfortunately the now defunct Meltdown Comics, right? Bigger, flashier destination shops, but sometimes a nice a small local comic shop where everybody there knows who you are and they know what you like. And even if you didn't request the book, they set it up. This is not an ad for them. And
by the way, Mike, let's give your local a shout out because I've actually been there. You shouted them out. We weren't able to meet there. I had to go without you, but do you want to shout out your local?
Yeah, Graham's Comics in Chicago. There's a couple good locations. Great for collectibles too, right downtown. Yeah. I'll give them a shout out. And then my local store up here is Heroes and Heroines up if you're in the Evanston area near Chicago. There's a really good game and toy store with tons of collectibles there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. There was for a while, they had some cards I kept thinking I was going to pick up and send to you, but they got out of that market pretty quick as they moved store locations.
Well, now I'm angry at you, Mike.
Yeah.
Do this to me. We did kind of go on tangents because that's what Youngblood does. Youngblood is very tangential. It's very all over the place, not narratively strong. Look, it was the Wild West of self-publishing. Almost all self-publishing was one person, one book. There was never the co-creation of a publisher the way we had seen there, right? It was timely becoming Marvel. It was DC, right? It was all these different big long-term, we hadn't had an aggressively successful company. I mean, I would say, Dark Horse was really good at getting affordable licenses, which was smart, making Aliens and Predator by getting a good deal with Fox and all this stuff, right? But Image was by the people for the people, right? It was that it got away from itself. And Youngblood perfectly encapsulates everything not great about Image, but significant about Image, including the red light, green light of merchandising, of television, of film, right? Because Youngblood, I think they had one animated pilot or something like that. Wildcats had a TV show. Spawn had an Emmy-winning HBO animated.
Yeah, it's one of the best shows. Yeah.
Yeah, where Todd is in his evil art studio.
Yep. Into the intros with him.
Ooh, so stupid. I love it. Savage Dragon had a syndicated animated show. You could watch that with right before and after like Street Fighter, the animated show. It was really USA Cartoon Express kind of thing. It's funny that Youngblood couldn't grow because Youngblood was style, substance, and one very eager, but unfortunately biting off more than they can chew 24-year-old.
Whatever became of Rob Liefeld after he left Image and Shame, he was never heard from again, right?
I don't know if you know this. He created Deadpool.
Rob Liefeld created Deadpool, not based on anything at all.
And certainly he's the one that created the entire textual creation of the character and how the character interacts with people. I'm sure, you know, Fabian and more importantly, Joe Casey had nothing.
Yeah.
But I think this is I made the joke that I was like, kind of screw you, Mike, for making us do this. But I actually am really glad we did this because I think this is a very significant and important thing to talk about when we talk about getting into comics. Some people, this was the thing that got them into comics and also the thing that got them out of comics because of that lack of consistency, that lack of quality. It was, you know, again, style, substance. It was all about the image of that. But I think it's really significant. And I hope we covered why it's so significant clearly, right?
Yeah. It was a explosion at the time that brought everyone's, hey, come here, look at this shiny thing. What do we got over here? And a lot of people had never seen comics before or taken them even seriously. We're hearing about speculator markets. People wouldn't have thought about it, like we're coming in for other reasons. And while a lot of us went away, a lot of us stayed with it over the years. I keep saying, Image is what brought me back every time. Whatever became out of the ashes of those original 7, what they started, they have a great publishing company.
They do. They've published some great stuff. Powers started out as an Image book. Powers was one of my favorites. The Max was fantastic and a very unique storytelling style. So
yeah, The Wicked and the Divine, I've gone back and read that a couple times. That's brilliant. Like the new one right now, Powers Fantasy. Kieran Gillen right now, that's what's bringing me into comic shops now, waiting for the next issue.
So it's really great stuff. And I hope you guys do manage to find your style and substance in there. I think I picture Rob Liefeld in the same way I picture Zack Snyder, which is somebody who is very good at a very specific thing that tries to do too much. I think Zack Snyder is one of the best cinematographers in the world. I truly believe that Zack Snyder is an unparalleled cinematographer. I also think he's one of the worst writers, and I think he's a pretty mid director, but his stuff looks so good.
He could have had amazing careers making some coffee table books that would have just blown us away.
I mean, and you know, if Zack Snyder was more willing to work with other people's scripts, you know, 300 is like a pretty decent movie. And I've said this before, Watchmen, I do not hate that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because Alan Moore and Frank Miller, who are two of the most legendary creators of the 80s and beyond,
was the zombie movie he did wasn't his script, and that was brilliant too. Like the early,
who wrote that script, right?
James Gunn, right?
James Gunn.
Yeah, there's a reason for why it's so good.
Yeah. So, and that's an example of why you have that. But once they start to grow out there, and again, Rob writing off of Weezy Simonson and Fabian Nicieza, people who are great professional writers, and you got much higher quality stuff to go around all the kind of hilariously stylized stuff. Whereas,
and it was right before a few years ago, I went back and reread all of X Factor from #1 for all the Simonson stuff. That's a good story for that time.
Oh yeah, that's how you get the first appearance of Apocalypse.
Right. All that stuff with the seeds of Cable and Nathan and Summers are all in there.
Yeah, it's Uncanny 201?
Yep. You and I both have that, Jeff, right?
Huh?
You and I both have 201, right?
Not only do I have 201, but I got 201 in that same 50 cent bin that I
Hey,
got that Ninja Turtles book, I think somebody accidentally put some higher end.
Are you
books.
sure there wasn't like a devil character there and you might have inadvertently traded for something? Like this sounds like a sci-fi horror thing where you may not have realized as a child you traded for a bunch of good comics or something.
Man, that would have been the saddest Faustian deal of all time. And
like
something
an
I
issue
would
of
have
Ice
done-
Cream Man. Speaking of Image,
Yeah, right.
right, find yourself trapped in one.
Something I have since 2003. I have gone through, but like without Image, you wouldn't have had a lot of the great independent, unique imprints that we now have. I think it's very important. Do I think that Image also contributed to the destruction of the comics industry? Absolutely. They're not every publisher at that time was mostly responsible, except maybe Dark Horse. They were pretty chill. I'm gonna shout out Dark Horse for not sacrificing, because like you saw like Valiant with, you know, how many Turok #1 chromium covers are there and all that stuff like that. But you know, Dark Horse seemed to really just, we got great writers, great artists moving forward. We don't need too many foil embossed things. We're just gonna keep going. So I'm gonna give Dark Horse, granted their movies were not great, but well, The Mask, people like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that is the case. And also, side note, speaking of like cartoons and stuff, I do want to shout out MTV's Oddities season 2's The Max, which I thought was really, or second series, not season 2, because it started with MTV's Oddities, The Head. If you guys remember The Head, the animated thing where a guy had an alien living in his giant head, and it was very interesting. But then they
Vaguely familiar. No, I never think I watched that. I never saw the Max either.
You were
that
like,
series.
it sounds like Jeff's just making stuff up now, but I can't even tell.
they did a Max cartoon that was a bit rotoscoped of the comic itself. Fantastic.
I never
really-
saw it, but I can picture the art and like commercials for it. It's very distinct.
Random capper note to what you were saying, Jeff, as just a comparable. My son was really interested in Hellboy, and my local comic shop, House of Heroes, had a graphic novel of Hellboy from 1993, comparing, as mentioned, with Youngblood. I go in and say, I would like to buy Hellboy, and they go, of course, we have this in graphic
Here's
novel form.
30
People want it.
volumes of the graphic
Well,
novel.
well, not even that. Just, hey, we have the first comics reprinted in a form you're going to want to read all at once. Absolutely. I go into House of Secrets and go, hey, I would like to get Youngblood. And it's not only, we haven't put that into trade because people are demanding it. Although apparently that's coming out. I'm
Yeah,
going to be very curious to see what
There
happens.
were
with
legal
that.
issues over the publication of Youngblood, by the way. That's
So that's what's kept it.
but it's
it's-
also, you're not getting Wildcats reprints, trade paperbacks either. Nobody cares. So now that we've kind of taken a big sort of like overviewing look of Youngblood and its importance, and I am sorry if you were looking for us to do like a more play-by-play thing, you would have stopped listening. It is bad. But the significance of Youngblood, of the creation of Image Comics, and Youngblood being the representative book that sort of started the craze of Image Comics, of Rob and his sort of contemporaries at the time, changing and shifting the entire comic book market and the entire comic book world, is so incredibly significant that the style and story of this mean way less than the importance and significance of that. So, Mike, thank you for picking this terrible fucking book.
You are welcome. I knew I would have to be into it too. I mean, I've been forced to read it so much about it over the past couple weeks and put the site together on MikeSlater.com. So it's
And I was-
kind of a blast. I subjected myself to it.
I was going to promote MikeSlater.com. Everybody, make sure you check that out because you do have all that stuff on there about Youngblood. So if people want to read more, they can check that out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Now,
check that out. You can do that. You can check out, I can plug my band too. Look up on Spotify, Mad Bread, if you like country folk music. We have 3 albums that are out that are on there. There's one more on Bandcamp, but yeah, check out Mad Bread on Spotify next time.
yeah, go to Bandcamp though, because that means
Yeah,
you
that's-
get some
that-
money, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you get, I don't know how Spotify got 2 of our albums, but that's where everybody listens to us. So after you're done there, if you want a third one, Bandcamp's the one you can buy from us.
Yeah, and go get Friday, right? Bandcamp Friday, that's the thing.
I think so, yeah.
Where like
They-
you get
they-
all the money from all the sales or something like that.
Yep.
So if you're listening to this for free tomorrow to help out Mike, you can do that. I will say, Jeff, I loved this arc of Nerd, which is kind of a very weird trilogy because it's kind of comic origins. We did manage to, it was funny to kind of devolve from like an origin of a comic hero and my origin with that to an origin with an amalgam of heroes to whatever the hell Youngblood was. absolute blast. This was a completion of the Jeff May verse. One of the most shocking things about this was Michael Vincent Bramley and Mike Slater, two of the creators for Jeff May. Of course, Mike doing the theme song for I Must Break You, and I have co-opted it for I Must Drake You. And then Michael Vincent Bramley, who has done work on many things Jeff has been a part of over Gainfully Unemployed, as an example, as well as the Nerd Christmas card, which I think does have to be an annual thing. I'm really going to have to think about what to do for next year.
Heck yeah.
Mike and Mike knew each other, which was remarkable. That was the most hilarious part. So that wasn't even intended when I started this. When I started asking you both to guess, then when you're like, oh yeah, we actually know each other. That's funny. Two of the most
Do you know each other
creative
personally, or do you know each other through like the message boarding or discords of other?
We knew each other personally and then figured out like we'd both done things like for Crack People and everything over the years too.
That's what I was wondering, because that's a way more interesting story than just we met on a website.
And a message board too. He's in New York, and then our actually spouses know each other through work. So we all have family back in Michigan and go there for Thanksgiving. So when we're all there for family time, a bunch of us meet up.
That's so
Mike
cool.
and I are both in that group. Yeah.
And now you guys can brag at Thanksgiving about how you were all on the same season of Nerd, which is obviously something that you want to talk about.
This is huge. This is huge for us.
No, but Mike, thank you so much for coming on, everybody. Check out MikeSlater.com, and an extra special shout out to our producers. Dre, do you have anything else to share?
Well, you can find me most places as Nerd Numbers, including Blue Sky. I have been doing the Box Score Geek Show regularly, to your advice, Jeff, on regular podcasts. So just look for the Box Score Geek Show everywhere podcasts are found. As of the date of this recording, all of the Denver Nuggets front office just got fired, which was
interesting,
wild. And we actually had a podcast on that, as I am a huge Denver Nuggets fan, as people know. And then, of course, the thing I am most proud of at the moment is over here is the podcast, Maybe Podcasts, I produce over at patreon.com/Jeff May. So absolutely, if you're listening to this for free, we love you. Patreon.com/Jeff May. A litany of ways to support making more stuff, making more podcasts, hopefully. And Jeff, I'll leave that into what you already got, stuff that's on the pipe.
Well, I mean, you obviously know, if you are here or listening to this, then at least Jeff Has Cool Friends is in your purview, because that's the network that this is on. If you want early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content, head to patreon.com/Jeff May, where you get not only that, but new and interesting and fun shows coming in, exclusives, lots of really great stuff, including you can get cards in the mail. That's very exciting. Dre, are you going to send me Youngblood cards to open?
I may have bought you some Profit cards while we were talking.
To be fair, I'm much happier that you said Profit instead of Youngblood. I've had the Youngblood set. It's all bad. It's terrible red borders. It's garbage. But definitely check that out. Of course, all the stuff I do with Tom Ryman, Gamefully Unemployed, with Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, and all the stuff I do with Adam Todd Brown on the You Don't Even Like This network. Like, you don't even like sports, and you don't even like this show. And we're going to have the Monday show coming soon and everything. So lots of really fun stuff. Again, the card show is at Jeff Has Cool Cards, is the YouTube page where you can see I Must Break You. Thank you all for listening. We will see you next month. But of course, we will continue to have more stuff going up on the Patreon. So definitely check that out. But Nerd, we're going to start a new season next month, Dre, and you and I are going to have to figure out what that is. We love you all. Thank you. We will see you next month. Or if you're just a part of the network and you're subscribed, see you even sooner than that. Love you. Bye. Mike, say goodbye.
Bye all.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. Also, you'll get early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and pack-breaking videos. And it's also worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channels. That's right, channels. For Pack Breaking by Jeff and myself, head over to youtube.com/@JeffHasCoolCards, where Jeff breaks packs weekly, opens stuff you send him in the mail, and sometimes even gives away cool prizes. For Jeff's podcasts, head over to youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, he uses that name across a lot of social media, including Blue Sky. You can find him at Instagram at HeyThereJeffro, but you're going to have to add a 2 to the end. So that's HeyThereJeffro2 over at Instagram. You can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers. Shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.